Hello and welcome to another episode of Plain Talk here on Eagle Eye TV. I'm your host, Ken Ward, and this week we're joined by Justice Sue Bell Cobb, former Alabama Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and now candidate for the Democratic nomination for Governor of Alabama. Thank you so much, Justice Cobb, for joining us.
Thank you, Ken. I'm loving being back in Auburn.
Justice Cobb, you're running to be the Democratic nominee for governor this term over in 2018. Could you describe just a little bit about your background in state politics and what you'd like to bring to the governor's mansion possibly?
Thank you, Ken. I'd love to. I was the last Democrat to win statewide when I ran for Chief Justice. I ran against an incumbent Republican, great guy, who outspent me almost three to one. And I was able to be victorious in 2006 and become the first female Chief Justice in the history of the state. But prior to that, I became a judge when I was 25 years old, if you can believe that. And I was then elected, I was appointed and then elected and then re-elected as the Conecuh County District Judge, because I'm from Evergreen. So I served there for 13 and a half years, and I tried cases including Lee County, almost 40 counties of our 67 counties within that 13 and a half years. Kind of have robo travel. I filled in when judges were sick or judges had were out for, perhaps they had retired or even some died. And I would go fill in and help out during the interim until another judge was appointed or elected. And then I was elected to the Court of Criminal Appeals. So in 1994, I ran my first statewide race, and I ran for the Court of Criminal Appeals, and I was the first woman ever elected to the Court of Criminal Appeals. I served on the Court of Criminal Appeals for 12 years, 2 terms, and then I ran for Chief Justice.
A lot of people, when they think about judges, think about the federal judges, especially with the Supreme Court and things like that, who are appointed by the president. Many people might not realize that in Alabama, most judges, if not all of them, are actually elected. I know you've actually spoken out against electing the process of electing judges via a ballot. Can you describe that, talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Thank you for asking me about that. Except for municipal judges, all judges in Alabama, all state judges are elected, as you mentioned. And I wrote an op-ed piece that was published in Politico, and it discussed my dismay over the process by which judges have to be elected. Because judges don't it's not like being a representative like on the city council or county commission. Judges don't make decisions based on party. They make their decisions based on the law and the facts. So it's not like you can promise anybody anything other than to be competent, to be a good person and have an abiding concern for people. Know the law, but really have an abiding concern for people. And I just think it's highly inappropriate for judges to have their hands out asking for money to fund a campaign effort. The state of Florida, for instance, has a ban on judges personally soliciting contributions, and I just really think that's appropriate. So the Aspen Institute picked up my op-ed piece that was in Politico and made it the best idea of the day for the world, and I'm very proud of that fact because I do believe that judges are different than your just typical politician. You're somebody that's elected based on their views, based on their position or their views on issues, and I think that it hurts the judiciary. For judges, all we have are people's respect for us. And if we do anything to undermine that respect, it hurts the judiciary. And the whole premise is based upon equal justice under the law. And people need to know when they walk in a courtroom that a judge is going to be nothing but fair.
You ended your most recent term as Chief Justice by resigning, actually. Could you describe a little bit behind your reasoning behind that? I know there were several, but and just talk about why you made that decision at that time.
I retired. I retired after 30 years of wearing a robe. And the true, for all of us that are in office, the question is what is really, because some people have used the word quitting. Well, I had made decisions over people's lives for 30 years, but so somebody's said quitting, and what is quitting? It's when you leave or you leave something before you've accomplished what you set out to accomplish. And during my 4.5 years as Chief Justice, I championed juvenile justice reform. I helped write the legislation and then helped advocate for it through the legislature, secured the passage of juvenile justice reform, reducing the number of kids in lockup by 60%, juvenile crime went down. I made the expansion of model drug courts a major priority. I got model drug courts in every county but one. I received a national award for the largest increase of model drug courts in the nation. I got an access to justice commission established to try to make it easier for people who don't have means to be able to get into civil court and have pro bono lawyers represent them in civil matters. I worked on just, as you can imagine, a variety of things. One of those things I'm most proud of was that I turned the courts paperless, saving taxpayers millions. And then my mother became very ill. And I made the decision that I knew I would disappoint people, which I don't live my life to disappoint people, but I knew that my mission had changed and that I needed to be with my mother, and so that's what I did. And you know, all of us have to look and say, what's our mission today? And make sure we're not on yesterday's mission. And I made the decision to be with my mother, and I was with her when she breathed her last breath. And that's something no one will ever, ever make me regret.
You, having served many years in the judiciary and really seeing Alabama's criminal justice system up close, Alabama has really, over the past several decades, really faced some prison issues, something that many governors have tried to address and many legislators have tried to address, but really nothing really big has really gotten accomplished. In what ways do you plan, as if elected governor, to possibly try to tackle those issues?
No one running for governor as a Republican or a Democrat is more qualified on this issue than Sue Bell Cobb. I mean, I am the only lawyer running, much less having run a branch of government as I did as Chief Justice when I was over the entire judiciary. And doing something about sentencing and making our laws, particularly our nonviolent and drug laws, more in line with other states is very important, because what the sentencing scheme we have now really still is unfair. It's improved because the legislature, I worked on sentencing reform and the legislature made some improvements, but we still have the most overcrowded, underfunded prison system in the nation with the least number of correctional officers. And that's not good for public safety, and it's not fair, and it's not we need to provide a safe, humane place for people to be imprisoned. And what we have now is a system that in many ways is broken. A lot of my efforts as Chief Justice and on the Court of Criminal Appeals was to work in this area. For instance, juvenile justice reform. Juvenile court's the feeder system for the adult system, right? You know, folks don't start out committing capital murder. They get in trouble as a juvenile. And I did about as much as anybody on those issues to try to make sure that we're locking up the kids that need to be locked up, and that we're not locking up those that are at low risk to commit other offenses or to hurt people. You know, I told our juvenile judges have the philosophy of do no harm. We're not going to just lock up kids because we're mad at them. I mean, lock them up because, you know, it's going to help protect the public and achieve the right result. So on sentencing, drug courts is like your first incident. Drug courts is like the first example that we had in our criminal justice system of sentencing reform. And that's why I made model drug courts and courts of accountability a major priority and championed those, as I mentioned, got the national award for the largest increase in drug courts. Because drug courts, what it really does, the way I like to explain it, I've written an article on this in the Book of the States, that it's better to use our power and influence to fix people rather than just fill prisons. And when I mean fix, I don't mean that to be, I mean really to try to look at the issue that led them to get into trouble. And as you well know, most times what that is a failure to succeed in school, and then drug and alcohol issues, mental health issues that are unresolved. And Alabama does as little on substance abuse treatment of any state in the nation. So that is going to be a priority for Sue Bell Cobb when I become governor, is doing something to provide long-term, low-cost, quality drug treatment. And when we do that, we're going to be safer, and we're going to see our prison population drop, no doubt about it. But there's lots of other things we need to do. You know, we need graduated release facilities, we need work release facilities, we need community corrections, and I'm totally opposed to mega prisons. That mega prison bill was not good public policy. Correctional facilities need to be local. They need to be close to the people, because contact with your families is extremely important part to make sure that you don't reoffend. So there's lots we've got to do, and I want to submit to the people that nobody knows as much on those issues as me. And my life work, I have a body of work to show that I've made it a priority. And I didn't have to do it. I did it because I believed it was the right thing to do.
You talked about education in the state. We've seen over the past 2 to 3 years, we've seen a really big crisis at the State Department of Education with multiple superintendents. We've seen some disagreements within the state school board with Mayor Scott Hunter even turning in some ethics violations possibly. What do you think is the solution to Alabama's education problem? We've seen some people say that the governor should appoint the state school board. We've seen some people complain that it's a lack of leadership. But what do you think is the way Alabama can move forward on that?
I'm convinced there's several things, but one is lack of leadership. When I become governor, I'm going to attend the state school board meetings. You know, right now the governor is the chair of the school board. I will attend those school board meetings. I may not can make it to every one of them, but I'll be at enough of them so that I can have a hand in the policy that the state school board constructs. And I've got lots of ideas about what we can do to make our system better. But the number one thing that I'm going to do that for sure none of the Republicans have said there is some agreement on the Democrat side with those that are running with me as Democrats, is the lottery. I have designed a plan called the Lifelong Learner Lottery, and the proceeds from the lottery will bring in, the estimates are about $300 million a year. From that $300 million, I want to fully fund 4-year-old kindergarten. Right now we're only meeting 28% of that need. So now that would mean every 4-year-old that wants to go to public school kindergarten would have access to it. Because you know, Kim, we actually do have lottery now. It's who gets into 4-year-old kindergarten. I mean, that's so wrong. So rather than supporting the education of the kids in Georgia or Tennessee or Florida, we need to keep that money home. And when we do, we'll fully fund K-4. We'll help with child care on a sliding scale so that the children that need access to quality child care will be able, their parents will actually be able to afford it, and they'll be able to succeed when it's time to go to first grade, like you were. Like my daughter Caitlin was prepared and ready to succeed. So that's the first component. The second component is to fully fund career tech. When Sue Bell Cobb becomes governor, we are going to put from the lottery $50 million a year that will go to put state-of-the-art career tech in the hands of every single child in public school in Alabama. What is that going to mean? That is going to mean that we'll actually have the money for workforce development in our high schools and have dual enrollment with 2-year or tech schools. It means that our dropout will go to almost nothing. It means that our crime will go down because the kids that are getting in trouble, see again, you see how it impacts the other things such as crime. The kids that now will be able to get a skill, they'll be able to get a job, they'll be able to support their family. They won't be getting in trouble. The third component of the Lifelong Learner Lottery will be to fully fund the gap for Pell Grants. You're familiar with Pell Grants. Pell Grants are your federally funded scholarship program so that folks that have lower economic ability would be able to go to 2-year tech school or 4-year school. So it'll impact kids here at Auburn and in every school in Alabama where if they qualify for a Pell Grant, they won't get to their junior year and Pell run out. They'll be able to finish, be able to go to school for free, and be able to get that job and be able to support their family. And then if there's any money left over, I'm hoping and praying that there would be about $10 million, and I have an idea about what to do about student debt. And the idea is I haven't got a name for it yet, so maybe your listeners could come up with a name. I'd love that if the Auburn students were the ones that came up with a name. If we could take about $10 million and put it in a fund specifically to help young adults with college debt, and that the idea would be sort of like AmeriCorps, you know, where you would go and teach in an inner city school and then you have your debt forgiven, right? Mm-hmm. Well, think about it in terms of expansion of data-driven C3s. For instance, one I like to use is Boys and Girls Club. Every single low-income neighborhood should have access to a Boys and Girls Club. So let's say there's not one in an area outside from Auburn, in one of the little cities outside from Auburn, and there's a need and there's a desire in that community to have one. So some young people that have college debt that are working, maybe they're bankers, maybe they're lawyers, maybe they're whoever, teachers, that they would then go to that community, see if there's a need, see if there's an interest, work with churches, the city council, the county commission, and put a board together, put a Boys and Girls Club in, and then they would get $10,000 paid on their student debt. So it doesn't have to be a Boys and Girls Club. Maybe it's a court-appointed special advocate, which is a program for volunteers to work with foster children. Maybe it's Habitat for Humanity. Maybe it's the fact that one of our rural counties, which we have a number of them, don't have outpatient drug treatment or alcohol treatment. So it put a C3 together, a C3 board, a nonprofit board together, do some fundraising and help bring a counselor in to help provide a service that community is lacking to benefit people. I think it could transform the state, and am very concerned that student debt is like our next looming mortgage crisis. You know how the last recession was the great incentive to that recession, unfortunately, was the default of so many home mortgages. And I'm very concerned that our student debt is keeping young people, and really folks that are not so young anymore. I mean, they're in their 40s and still have debt that they haven't been able to pay off. So what does that mean? That means they can't go buy a house. They're not getting that extra car. You know, they're not able to do, and so all of this is going to help the economy. It's going to mean my plan for the Lifelong Learner Lottery is going to be jobs, jobs, jobs. It's going to tell the world we're open for business. It's going to be actual jobs for every county, and then it's going to be a number of jobs that we're going to attract because Alabama will have a well-developed, well-skilled workforce.
All right, we got to take a quick break right here. You're watching Plain Talk here on Eagle Eye TV. We're joined by former Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, Sue Bell Cobb, who's also running for governor. Please join us in just a second. Thank you.
As a mom and an Olympian, I know the importance of getting to the finish line quickly.
But quicker isn't always better when it comes to conversations about the dangers of underage drinking.
General Marshall is right. You don't need to get the entire point across in one dinner or one car ride.
Stick to those meaningful moments. A text or short conversation can go a long way.
And be sure to use resources like asklistenlearn.org.
They've got everything from conversation starters to facts about the dangers of underage drinking.
So start the conversation today about saying yes to a healthy lifestyle.
And no to underage drinking.
Welcome back to Plain Talk here on Eagle Eye TV. I'm your host, Ken Ward, and this week we're joined by former Chief Justice of the Alabama State Supreme Court, Sue Bell Cobb. Thank you, Justice Cobb, for joining us.
Thank you, Ken. I'm delighted to be here.
A little bit right before we went to break, you were talking a little bit about your education plan. We've seen it had many different steps, and we've seen many different governors try to propose different plans to fix Alabama's education. One of your big plans, you said at the end, was trying to reinvest in some of our low-income rural communities with the $10 million maybe that might be left over. With so many thousands of students having student loan debt, do you think $10 million is going to be a little short to be able to achieve that goal?
Hopefully we'll be able to increase it. I think $10 million is not enough, but at the same time it's a huge start when we don't have any program right now to help individuals who are encumbered right now with high student loans that they can't pay off. They're struggling. They're getting it refinanced, and it's hurting all their prospects to really be able to take care of their family. So I do think it's an idea. Nobody else has, you know, I don't really know what to even call it yet, but it is a way to take nonprofit, data-driven nonprofits and put them in underserved communities, and then at the same time help folks with their student debt.
We've seen Alabama's economy kind of grow over the past few years. We've seen Governor Ivey even recently announced that the state's jobless rate is the lowest it's ever been in the state's history. How do you believe that we can continue that trend of job creation under a possible Cobb administration? I'm
so glad you asked that, Kim, because it's not just jobs. The question is do we have high-paying jobs? And the problem in Alabama is that we're the fourth highest percentage of minimum wage jobs. That's our problem. And so parents are having to work 2 and 3 jobs to try to put enough money together to support their children. Right now, the median age for a minimum wage worker in Alabama, are you ready, is 35. Now, do you know what that means? That means as many 50-year-olds are earning the minimum wage as 20-year-olds. So I advocate an elevation of the minimum wage. I think it's wrong to expect people to support themselves or a family on $7.25 an hour. So what I'm going to be proposing when I become governor is that there would be 2 minimum wages, one for 21 and under, which is your first job, you're being trained, you're being taught work ethic and how to dress and how to respond, and a lot of training, and companies are investing in young people. But after 21, I'm convinced that people need to make more.
And what do you think would be the ideal wage? We've seen some studies recently out of Seattle that have shown that their minimum wage actually hurt low-income workers more than it helped. What range do you think we should have of the minimum wage?
I would love to see the data from the state of Washington go, because most of the data shows that it has a significant positive impact on the economy. A lot of people on the other side that are opposing it want to say that it decreases jobs, that it hurts the poor, and that's not, the data I've seen doesn't prove that. It shows, and when you pay people more, they're spending it. And so it's actually helping the economy. There's just a few businesses that really depend on and only pay minimum wage, but yet you'll see, Chick-fil-A doesn't pay minimum wage, and they're doing just fine. So it's really, we need a philosophy of understanding that people cannot be expected to earn just $7.25 and be able to make ends meet. They just can't. They'd have to live at home, with family to be able to do that.
Many of Alabama's rural hospitals have closed over the past decade, leaving many communities having to drive many hours even to get basic care, like things like giving birth to a baby and things of that nature. Many people in your party have proposed expanding Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, which Governor Bentley did not do, and Governor Ivey has not done either. Is that something that you would support and try to push for if elected governor?
Yes, absolutely is. Medicaid should be expanded, and I think that there's ways that we can make some changes within how pharmaceuticals are purchased and how we're working on the pharmaceutical part of Medicaid, so that we could save money right there that would help us expand Medicaid. But I'm literally, when I become governor, I will take immediate action to expand Medicaid. Alabama has the leanest, meanest Medicaid eligibility in the nation. If you take one more dime from our Medicaid program, we lose it all. And what has not happened in Alabama is we haven't had courageous leaders that will tell people what they should hear, not what they want to hear. And the previous Republican leaders have consistently said, well, Medicaid's a black hole. Well, we don't have to fund it. But Medicaid is one of those programs, one of those federal programs that benefits every single person in the United States of America. Because if we did not provide Medicaid to the very poor, we wouldn't have that foundation of health care in all of our rural hospitals. 74% of our rural hospitals and community hospitals are operating in the red, at a loss. We've got to expand Medicaid so that we can save those hospitals. We've already had 8 hospitals. Even Governor Ivey's own hospital in her hometown has closed. And what happens when a hospital closes? What happens? You've lost a significant number of jobs, because your hospital in each county throughout the state, that's one of your biggest employers, and it's one of your higher paying employers. And what doctor? The doctors will leave. Will industry come to a county that doesn't have a hospital? The chances are very slim. So if we don't save our rural hospitals and community hospitals, we will have hurt everybody in our rural areas, and we will be changing that rural area forever. Why? Because people will leave, and we'll only have the very poor and the elderly left in a rural area that we don't have public transportation, and then they have no access to health care. That is intolerable, and under a Sue Bell Cobb administration, we are going to work day in, day out to make sure that that does not happen.
You're talking about people leaving some of the rural counties. Census data has shown many of Alabama's counties are losing population, especially many of the rural ones. How would you try to regain some population in some of these small towns and small counties that might be losing them, and especially might be losing their young people?
Ken, I am convinced that the lifelong learner lottery that I'm proposing is going to have a definite positive impact on every county, but particularly our rural counties. Under my plan, every single county, that's Dallas County, that's Cleburne County, that's Randolph County, that's every single county, Barber County, will have their share of the jobs, because it's 4-year-old kindergarten jobs, it's child care jobs, it's 2- and 4-year jobs, it's workforce, it's career tech jobs. So every county is going to get some of those jobs. So that's going to be extra money, that's going to be higher wages. But more importantly, because we will be maxing out workforce development, our rural counties will start getting those industries, because you can see in some of the urban areas there's not enough workers. They'll be going out in the rural areas. Education is going to improve. Quality education yields quality jobs. And when we invest in the Lifelong Learner Lottery, it's going to be extra money without raising taxes that goes into the Education Trust Fund. We can help the Reading Initiative. Are you familiar with the Alabama Reading Initiative?
Yeah, it's been cut back in recent years.
It's been cut back. Did you know only 10% of our children that need it get it? So with Sue Bell Cobb's Lifelong Learner Lottery, I will insist that significant increases, and I hope we be able to completely meet the need of our struggling readers. Because what happens when you are a successful reader, you're a good reader, you're going to succeed. When you're a good reader, you're going to succeed. And that's what we want for all children. Opportunity, talent is universal. Opportunity is not. And under my administration as governor, we are going to be able to expand that opportunity, because once people have the skills, when they learn to read, when they're struggling readers now can know the joy of reading, and with workforce development, all the young people that weren't intended to get a traditional university education, they'll be able to get that skill that we so desperately need. Industry is going to come. That's going to help every county in Alabama, but most particularly the rural counties.
And then my last question is, Alabama is a pretty red state, running as a Democrat in a Republican-leaning state. How do you believe that you're going to try to set yourself apart, especially if you're running against possibly a Republican incumbent governor?
I'm glad you asked that question. I was the last Democrat to win up until who won?
Doug Jones.
Doug Jones, December 12th. Doug Jones' victory proved that a Democrat can win again statewide in Alabama. Lee County is a prime example. Doug Jones became a U.S. Senator with, by 20 points. I mean, it was some huge amount in Lee County. And so that, for instance, is the best proof that we need. But also, I'm convinced that my ideas about the lottery are going to are very attractive to people. The people of Alabama want a lottery. They want a lottery. They think it's just dumb we don't have it. And I'm convinced that it is going to help me win. The other thing I think that's going to help me as well is the fact that I'm the only candidate who truly is maintaining a clean water platform. Alabama, I want people to know. I want all of your listeners and viewers to know that Alabama has the second most toxic drinking water in the nation. We have the longest number of miles of navigable waterways. We're the most biodiverse. And because of our water, the fact that the Republicans were in charge, while they've been in charge, they zeroed out water quality enforcement. Zeroed it out. Used to be 6.5 million, now it's zero. Well, what incentive, how do you correct it if you don't know that the water is inferior or toxic? Ken, did you know that 31 counties in Alabama our children in those counties have lead in their bodies comparable or greater than Flint, Michigan? The people of Alabama need to know that. This is not a partisan issue. Clean water is something that all of us, whether we're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, clean water is essential to life. We need it to drink. We want it to swim in, play in, eat fish, that we catch in our rivers and streams. And I'm just convinced that when people know that they're going to respond, and they're going to say that it's time to have a governor who cares more about the next generation than the next election.
Thank you so much, Justice Cobb, for joining us, and thank you for joining us. Join us each week on Eagle Eye TV for a great in-depth conversation with a local community leader making a difference in our community or running for office in our community. Thank you so much and have a great week.